come at this industry from a slightly different standpoint, one which basically finds me almost accidentally being involved in the industry and coming into it from a perspective of purely being an entrepreneur in financial services. So what little or that I know and have experienced about wine has been purely as a consumer and a wannabe kind of connoisseur. Whether that's ever happened or not is still debatable. I think when we arrived in the industry from a wine producing point of view, the stark, I guess, characteristic that stood out was the fact that, bar none, I think we definitely have no problem with product. And when I say product, I'm talking about what we make in terms of varietals, in terms of just vintages. I think there's an incredible array of choice, and there's enough depth and complexity to find and hold our own place competitively in the global space. However, the contrast is that I found there's an obsession with what's in the bottle as opposed to what's around it. And from there, I'm really talking about effectively starting from the label to just what is the wine enjoyment experience. What is the story? We've heard from our two opening speakers about why it's important to tell stories. And if you put that in an African context, Africans and Africa is known for its storytelling tradition. And I find that we could do a lot of work in actually expressing that story with a lot more clarity and a lot more authenticity, to pick up on JP's point. With that, I think we will start to carve out our own niche in the global space. But I also want to talk a little bit about the fact that there's an overlooked segment of the market which is really, I think, presents a lot of promise, despite the fact that we've just recently experienced a lot of xenophobic attacks, particularly up in Gauteng. I think the African market presents a lot of promise, particularly West Africa and East Africa. It's untapped and unexploited, to use the word. And I think that we are too Eurocentric in how we present ourselves. And that is actually a function of, clearly, the lack of diversity, which we still need to work on, both on the production and the promotion side of things. I'll leave it there.
So for new entrants, how could they then be part of the collective and then initiate the market, the new markets?
Well, I think it comes back to this point of authenticity. You know, as long as you're telling your story from a place of a lived experience and a place of honesty and forthrightness, you can never be found wanting. If you're pretentious and you're trying to put yourself as something that you aren't, you'll be found out, and your product or your offering is not either sustainable or believable. And as we heard, the Gen Zs are all about, you've got to be real, keep it real. And if you don't have the core of what you are either projecting or offering to the market, being who you've always been and intend to be, you'll find that that's going to be difficult. And that goes through, I think, without speaking for Bertus, it goes through with food as well. If you look at what tourists spend their money on, I was just looking at the stats last night, food and wine are still relatively low in the pecking order. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement to move us as a category of expenditure to the visitor a lot more. Where does South Africa or South African wine sit, or how is it perceived in the global perspective? And when one talks about a Rhone-style blend or a Bordeaux blend, you know what you're talking about. And yes, the French make out like they've been at this much longer than we have, but actually it's the other way around. So the question is, do we have a collective objective of where South African wine wants to be and ought to be? And have we got clarity around what our collective product is? So are we known for particular varietals? And if we are, how are we placing those in the market? How are we pricing them? Because they can't all be the same. And most importantly, which objective criteria do we believe the market is looking for in the uniqueness that they can't get anywhere else in the world? And I've spoken to many people, large and smaller producers, and it seems to me that what we're settling for at the moment is each and every region of the winelands is really looking to do its own thing. I don't know that necessarily we found commonality as an industry in South Africa as to what South Africa stands for. But there's a lot of work to be done to start looking at cross-fertilizing, yes, I use that word. Where do we believe we should leave product or production for other guys who are either geographically better placed or skills-wise better placed for them to do, where we can then concentrate on presenting that and then collectively presenting a much more cogent product to the rest of the world.
Yes.